Greetings all, hope you're well. Now, every week people contact us because they've been told something online that sounds like the answer to all their council tax problems. Council tax is a contract. You never signed one, so you don't have to pay. It sounds simple and it sounds powerful. And if that were true, none of us would be paying council tax today. But it's not true. And believing it can cost you dearly. Trust me on this. So today I want to explain why, and more importantly, what you should be doing instead. Let me say something before we go further. If you believe this or you've watched videos online that make these claims, I'm not here to ridicule you or tell you that you're an idiot. I'm not. Quite the opposite. I completely understand why these arguments appeal to people. Remember, I've done a lot of these processes myself, I've tested a lot of them, and I've failed on a lot of them. Hence the reason why I always look to improve and have working processes. Now, when you're struggling financially, when you believe you've been treated unfairly, when the council won't listen, and when you're worried about enforcement, it's perfectly natural to go looking for answers that put you back in control. Unfortunately, not every answer you find online will actually help your situation, and that's why I wanted to make this video. So let's start with the idea of why this sounds so convincing. Most things we pay for do involve a contract. Your mobile phone, your broadband, your insurance, your gym membership. You choose to enter into an agreement, you agree to terms, and you sign up. It's understandable that people assume council tax works the same way, but it doesn't. Council tax is not a contract, it's a statutory liability. Now, that phrase can sound very technical, so let's break it down. A contract is something between two parties who voluntarily agree to. Generally speaking, you have an offer, an acceptance, something of value is exchanged, and both parties intend to create legal obligations. Council tax doesn't work like that. There isn't a contract because there doesn't need to be one. The obligation exists because Parliament passed legislation creating it. The principal piece of legislation is the Local Government Finance Act 1992. That legislation tells councils who is liable, how bills are calculated, what discounts and exemptions exist, how appeals work, and how unpaid council tax may be enforced. So your liability doesn't come from signing a contract, it comes from statute. A simple example often helps. Imagine you're driving on a motorway at 90 miles an hour where the speed limit is 70. You haven't signed a contract agreeing to obey the speed limit, you haven't accepted any terms and conditions, and you haven't given written consent, yet you still receive a speeding ticket. Why? Because the obligation comes from legislation, not from contract. Council tax works in exactly the same way. Now, another argument I often hear is, I never consented. Again, I understand why people say that. Consent is fundamental in contract law, but statutory law doesn't operate that way. There are lots of legal obligations that exist regardless of whether we agree with them or not. Things like income tax, planning law, road traffic law, jury service. These obligations don't depend on us signing a contract. Council tax falls into that category. Now, let me be really clear about something because I think this gets lost. I'm not here to defend council tax. I'm not here to tell you it's fair or that it's well designed or that it couldn't be improved or replaced entirely. I understand the frustration. I share it. The system places burdens on people who are already stretched. It's regressive in how it operates, and far too many people feel like they're pouring money into a black hole with no accountability. Wanting council tax to change, or even wanting it gone altogether, isn't unreasonable. That's a legitimate political position, and it's one many people are holding on to at the moment. But here's the hard truth. Wanting the system to change and refusing to engage with it are two very different things. You campaign for change, you support reform, you can push for something better, and you absolutely should. But while that system exists, it applies to you, whether you engage with it or not. Ignoring it does not make it go away. Refusing to acknowledge it doesn't switch off the liability. It just means the process continues without you. And by the time you realize that, you've often lost ground you can't recover. So the question is not whether council tax should exist. The question actually is, while it does exist, how do I protect myself and your family within it? That's not surrender. That's strategy. Working from within the system doesn't mean you accept it. It means you use the tools it provides to hold it to account, to challenge it on its own terms, force it to follow its own rules, and get the outcomes you're entitled to under the law as it stands today. Go and see my latest video on TikTok about one of our members who had a good success with the council. Now, here's the really important point. Just because council tax is statutory doesn't mean the council's right. And this is where I think many people are unintentionally led in the wrong direction. People spend weeks, months arguing about contracts. Meanwhile, they're asking the wrong legal question. And the clock is ticking on time limits they may not even know exist. You see, the council doesn't have to prove you signed a contract. They don't have to prove you consented. They don't have to produce your signature. Instead, they have to show they've applied the legislation correctly. That's a completely different question. So rather than asking, where's the contract, ask, am I actually liable? Am I the actual liable person under the legislation? Under the Local Government Finance Act 1992, there's something called the hierarchy of liability. It sets out the order in which people are considered responsible for paying council tax on a property. It starts with resident owners, then resident tenants, then non-resident owners, and so on and so forth. And getting that hierarchy wrong is one of the most common errors councils make. Instead of saying, I never agreed, ask, have you applied the hierarchy of liability correctly? Instead of demanding a signature, ask, have all the correct discounts, exemptions, and reductions been considered? Ask whether the bill has been calculated correctly. Ask whether the council has followed the correct statutory procedure. And ask them whether proper notice was given at each stage. Those are the questions the law requires them to answer. Those are the questions that do change the outcome. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about making this video is because of what I'm seeing every week. People coming to us after relying on information they found on social media, not because they're trying to avoid responsibility, but because they genuinely believe they have found the answer. But by the time they reach us, the statutory process has continued without them. They've received liability orders, additional costs have been added, enforcement agents have become involved. Some have had deductions taken directly from their wages, others have had deductions from their benefits where the law allows it. We've seen cases involving charging orders against properties. We've seen bankruptcy proceedings in high-value cases. And perhaps the saddest part of this is many of these people actually had issues that could have been challenged and successfully won. They may have been entitled to discounts, exemptions, council tax reduction, disability relief. They may have had the evidence the council had overlooked. They may have had genuine procedural arguments. But those issues weren't being raised. Instead, valuable time was spent arguing about contracts, and by the time they've asked for help, deadlines have passed and the enforcement process is well underway. For me, this is heartbreaking, very heartbreaking. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not telling you that councils never make mistakes. In fact, quite the opposite. Councils make mistakes all the time. People are billed incorrectly. The wrong liable person is pursued. Discounts are missed. Evidence is ignored. Procedures aren't always followed correctly. Those are real issues. Those are legitimate issues. And those are exactly the kinds of issues that local tax track we have in our community is designed to help you identify and challenge. Our process doesn't ask council to follow our rules. It asks them to follow their own. Every letter, every template, every notice we produce, every representation, every complaint, every appeal is built around legislation, regulations, published guidance, council policy, and evidence. Why? Because those are the things that councils, tribunals, and courts are legally required to consider. That's where your strongest arguments are. And when it's come to appeals, there's a dedicated route called the Valuation Tribunal, which hears disputes about council tax liability, banding, discounts, and exemptions. Knowing that route exists and knowing how to present your case within it can make all the difference. But you have to act within time limits. Now, if you've watched videos on I claim that all you have to do is ask for the contract and the council system falls apart, I do understand why that sounds attractive, trust me. If it were that simple, none of us would have had council tax bills. And here's the thing, this approach we now have works. We're seeing it right now, real people, real cases, real successes through the local tax track. People getting liability overturned because the council got the hierarchy wrong. People receiving reductions they'd been wrongly denied. People challenging procedure and winning because the council hadn't followed its own statutory process. These aren't flukes. These aren't lucky breaks. They happen because the track we've built is built on the actual law that councils are required to follow. And when you use that law properly, councils have to respond. That's what effecting change from within looks like in practice. You're not bowing to the system. You're not using the system's own rules to hurt you. You're using the system's own rules to hold it to a standard it doesn't always meet on its own. So if there's one message I'd like you to take away from this video, is this: don't waste your time trying to fight a statutory system using contract law. Use the legislation that created the system. Gather evidence, ask the right questions, challenge the council where they've made mistakes, preserve your appeal rights, and use the statutory remedies that Parliament has provided. You may not agree with every aspect of the council tax system. I don't. I'm sure many people don't. But if your goal is to protect yourself, your family, and your finances, then the strongest approach is to use the legal framework that decision makers are actually required to follow. That's why our process, the local tax track, exists. It's not giving people false hope. It's about giving people the best possible chance of achieving a fair and lawful outcome. Thank you for watching, and if this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, have a great day.